There comes a moment in every woman's life when she realizes chasing a man only pushes him further away. The more you beg, explain, text, and try to compete with another woman, the less valuable you start to feel in his eyes. And the painful truth is this: a man rarely comes back because you asked him to. He comes back when he feels your absence. He comes back when your energy changes. He comes back when he sees the woman he thought would wait forever, finally choosing herself. See, men are wired to notice what they can no longer control. The moment you stop reacting emotionally, stop proving your worth, and start rebuilding your confidence, his mind starts spinning. Suddenly, he wonders why you became silent, why you look happier, why you're no longer available whenever he wants attention. And even if he's with someone else right now, that emotional shift inside you can become the very thing that pulls him back faster than words ever could. The hardest thing for most people to accept is that chasing someone almost never creates love. It creates pressure. It creates emotional exhaustion. And eventually, it creates distance. When a woman constantly reaches out, constantly explains herself, constantly tries to fix the connection, the man slowly stops feeling the fear of losing her. Deep down, he starts believing she will always be there, no matter how poorly he behaves, no matter how inconsistent he becomes, and no matter how many mixed signals he sends. Human nature works like this. People often take for granted what feels permanently available. That is why the moment you stop chasing him, everything inside the dynamic begins to shift. Suddenly, the energy changes. The emotional pattern he became comfortable with disappears. The texts stop. The emotional reactions stop. The constant need for reassurance disappears. And now, for the first time in a long time, he is left alone with his own thoughts. That silence becomes loud in his mind because men notice changes in behavior more than emotional speeches. You can explain your pain 1,000 times and he may still ignore it. But when your actions change, when your attention disappears, when your presence no longer feels guaranteed, that is when he starts paying attention. A lot of women think disappearing means playing games, but this is not about manipulation. This is about reclaiming your emotional control. There is a difference between trying to punish someone and deciding to protect your own peace. When you stop chasing him, you are no longer placing your happiness in his hands. You stop waking up wondering why he did not text back. You stop analyzing his social media activity. You stop trying to compete with another woman for attention that should have been freely given to you in the first place. And something powerful happens in that process. You begin reconnecting with your own value. Men can feel desperation, even when no words are spoken. They can feel when a woman is terrified to lose them. And unfortunately, fear changes the balance of attraction. The more afraid you become of losing him, the less effort he often feels required to make. Not because he is evil, but because comfort removes urgency. If he believes you will tolerate anything, he has no reason to reflect on his actions. But when your energy shifts from fear to confidence, his certainty disappears. Now he starts wondering if someone else is getting your attention. He starts wondering if you are finally moving on emotionally. He starts wondering if he misjudged your worth. And the truth is, absence affects men differently than women sometimes expect. Women often process emotions immediately by talking, crying, overthinking, or seeking answers. Many men distract themselves at first. They may appear fine in the beginning. They may even act colder for a while. Some jump into another situation quickly because distractions are easier than emotional accountability. But silence has a strange way of catching up with people. Once the emotional noise fades, once the attention they were receiving disappears, reality slowly starts settling in. He remembers your consistency. He remembers your energy. He remembers the emotional safety you gave him. And most importantly, he notices the empty space where your presence used to be. That is why emotionally detaching is so powerful. Not because it guarantees he comes back, but because it forces truth into the situation. If he truly values you, your absence will reveal it. A man who genuinely cares will begin feeling the weight of losing access to you. He will start reaching out differently. He will become more intentional. He will stop assuming you are waiting forever. But if he does nothing, then his silence also reveals the truth you needed to see. Either way, you win because you stop wasting energy trying to force love from someone who should already recognize your value. Many women make the mistake of thinking love means endless sacrifice. They think if they just love harder, stay softer, stay more patient, eventually he will realize what he has. But relationships are not built through self-abandonment. Real love requires mutual effort. It requires consistency from both people. And the moment you are the only one fighting to keep the connection alive, the relationship becomes emotionally unbalanced. You start losing yourself trying to hold on to someone who is not even holding on to you with the same intensity. When you finally stop chasing him, you also stop feeding his ego with constant emotional access. You stop rewarding inconsistency with loyalty. You stop teaching him that he can disappear and still return whenever he feels lonely. Instead, you create boundaries. And boundaries are attractive because they communicate self-respect. A woman who can walk away from confusion carries a different energy than a woman begging to stay. One is operating from fear. The other is operating from strength. And here is something many people never talk about. Sometimes a man does not fully realize your importance until life forces him to experience you missing from it. Human beings often understand value through absence. That does not mean you should disappear hoping for revenge. It means you should understand that overgiving does not make people appreciate you more. Sometimes it only teaches them they can receive your love without earning it. The moment access to you is no longer automatic, perspective changes. But the most important part of all this is not whether he comes back. The real transformation happens inside you. Because once you stop chasing him, you begin seeing yourself differently. You realize your life cannot revolve around someone else's uncertainty. You remember your own dreams, your confidence, your peace, your identity outside the relationship. You stop shrinking yourself just to keep someone comfortable. And ironically, that emotional independence is often what makes you magnetic again. People are naturally drawn toward those who value themselves. Not arrogance, not coldness, but genuine self-respect. When a woman no longer tolerates emotional confusion, she becomes unforgettable. Her energy changes, her standards rise, her presence feels different. And whether he comes back or not, she is no longer trapped in the exhausting cycle of chasing someone who should have been meeting her halfway from the beginning. One of the biggest mistakes people make in relationships is believing that love alone is enough to keep someone interested. They think being available all the time, forgiving everything, and sacrificing their own needs will somehow make a man appreciate them more. But attraction does not grow through desperation. Respect does not grow through endless tolerance. In reality, a man pays much deeper attention to the woman who respects herself more than the relationship, because self-respect changes the entire energy of how a person is treated. When a woman knows her worth, she moves differently. She does not beg for consistency because she expects it naturally. She does not chase communication because she understands that genuine interest does not need to be forced. She does not lose herself trying to hold on to someone who keeps giving mixed signals. And that confidence creates something powerful. It makes a man realize he is dealing with someone who cannot be emotionally controlled through confusion, silence, or temporary attention. A lot of women fear that setting boundaries will push a man away. They think if they become too strong, too independent, or too unavailable emotionally, he will lose interest. But the opposite is often true. A man becomes more careful with a woman who clearly values herself. He thinks twice before disrespecting her because he senses she has the strength to walk away if necessary. People naturally protect what they fear losing. And when you make someone believe they can never lose you, they stop handling your heart carefully. This does not mean becoming cold or arrogant. Self-respect is quiet. It is calm. It is not loud insecurity pretending to be confidence. A woman with self-respect does not need to announce her value every 5 minutes. Her actions speak for her. She understands that love should feel mutual, not one-sided. She understands that consistency should not feel rare. She understands that if someone truly cares, effort will not feel forced. The problem is that many people enter relationships terrified of abandonment. They become so afraid of losing someone that they slowly abandon themselves first. They ignore red flags. They tolerate disrespect. They lower standards they once promised themselves they would never lower. They start accepting crumbs of affection because they fear having nothing at all. And over time, the relationship stops being built on love and starts being built on emotional survival. Men notice this shift more than women realize. A man can feel when a woman is willing to accept anything just to keep him around. And unfortunately, when someone believes there are no consequences for their behavior, they often become careless. Not always intentionally, but comfort changes effort. If he believes you will always forgive him, always stay, always wait, then urgency disappears. But when he sees that your self-respect matters more to you than simply having a relationship title, everything changes. Suddenly, he notices your silence differently. He notices your distance differently. He notices that you are no longer emotionally available for inconsistency. And that creates uncertainty in his mind. He begins wondering if he underestimated you. He starts realizing that your attention was valuable because it was genuine, loyal, and emotionally invested. Now that access feels limited, your presence becomes more significant. A strong woman does not stay where she constantly feels unwanted. She does not keep auditioning for love. She does not spend every day trying to convince a man to choose her. She understands something many people learn too late. The right relationship will never require you to destroy your dignity to maintain it. Real love brings security, not constant confusion. Real connection does not leave you emotionally starving while you keep pretending to be understanding. And here is the truth many people avoid. Men admire women they cannot emotionally manipulate. A woman who stands firm in her standards creates respect, even if the man does not admit it immediately. Why? Because strength is memorable. A woman who knows when to walk away leaves a lasting impact. She forces a man to confront the reality that love is not guaranteed access forever. Her absence carries weight because her presence carried value. Too many women believe being nice means endlessly accommodating bad behavior. They think patience means accepting emotional neglect. But there is a difference between being loving and being emotionally self-destructive. Self-respect means understanding that your kindness should never become permission for someone to take advantage of your heart. When you prioritize your own emotional well-being, your entire mindset changes. You stop obsessing over every text message. You stop panicking every time his energy shifts. You stop trying to compete with another woman because you realize your worth cannot be measured through comparison. And that inner stability creates a different type of attraction. Confidence is magnetic because it feels rare in a world full of emotional desperation. A man may enjoy attention from many women, but the woman he truly remembers is often the one who respected herself enough to never lose her identity for him. The woman who remained grounded. The woman who loved deeply without tolerating disrespect. The woman who understood that her value existed before him and would continue existing after him. And sometimes, the moment you stop prioritizing the relationship above your own peace is the moment he finally starts taking you seriously. Because now he sees that your love was a privilege, not an endless resource to misuse. He sees that you are capable of leaving confusion behind and choosing yourself. That realization can shake a man deeply, especially if he spent too much time assuming you would always remain available no matter how little effort he gave. At the end of the day, self-respect changes the entire relationship dynamic because it changes you. You stop operating from fear. You stop shrinking yourself to keep someone comfortable. You stop settling for emotional inconsistency disguised as love. And when a woman reaches that level of emotional strength, she no longer needs to chase validation from anyone. Her energy alone communicates that she knows exactly who she is. And that kind of confidence becomes impossible to ignore. Silence becomes dangerous when it is used as a weapon, but it becomes powerful when it comes from healing. There's a huge difference between ignoring someone to manipulate their emotions and stepping back because you are finally choosing peace over emotional chaos. Many people confuse the two. They think silence is about making someone suffer, making someone jealous, or forcing someone to panic. But real emotional growth is not about controlling another person's feelings. It is about learning how to control your own. When a woman is deeply hurt, her first instinct is often to explain herself over and over again. She wants closure. She wants understanding. She wants the man to finally see her pain and suddenly change. So she keeps reaching out, keeps repeating conversations, keeps trying to fix something that may already be emotionally broken. But after a while, those conversations stop creating connection and start creating emotional exhaustion. The relationship becomes trapped in a cycle of reaction, disappointment, and more reaction. Nothing truly changes because both people remain emotionally stuck in the same unhealthy pattern. Healing silence breaks that cycle. Healing silence says, I no longer need to beg for what should come naturally. It says, I am tired of explaining my value to someone determined to overlook it. It says, I deserve peace more than I deserve temporary attention. And once that shift happens internally, your silence carries a completely different energy. It no longer feels desperate. It no longer feels like a performance. It feels calm, grounded, and emotionally mature. Men can sense the difference. A manipulative silence usually feels loud. It is filled with passive aggression, hidden expectations, and emotional games. The person using it constantly checks their phone, constantly watches social media, constantly hopes the other person reacts quickly. Their silence is not peaceful at all. It is full of anxiety, full of waiting, full of emotional dependence. And eventually, that kind of silence loses its power because it still revolves entirely around the other person's validation. But healing silence is different because it is not centered around making him react. It is centered around rebuilding yourself. You stop obsessing over what he is doing every hour. You stop trying to decode every little sign. You stop chasing emotional clarity from someone who keeps creating confusion. Instead, your energy turns inward. You begin focusing on your mental health, your confidence, your goals, your routines, your happiness, and your emotional stability. And something incredible happens during that process. Your emotions stop controlling you. Most people never realize how much emotional chasing destroys self-worth over time. Every unanswered text feels personal. Every delay feels like rejection. Every cold response feels like proof that you are not enough. Slowly, your confidence becomes dependent on someone else's behavior. That is an exhausting way to live. Healing silence allows you to step outside that emotional prison. It creates room for you to breathe again, to think clearly again, to remember who you were before anxiety took over your peace. This is why silence rooted in healing becomes attractive. Not because it is meant to attract someone, but because emotional stability naturally changes your energy. People can feel when someone is emotionally centered. They can feel when someone is no longer operating from desperation. A woman who has healed carries herself differently. She speaks differently. She reacts differently. She no longer panics when someone pulls away because she understands that another person's inconsistency is not a reflection of her value. That emotional calmness can deeply affect a man, especially if he was used to having emotional control over the relationship. If he became comfortable with you always reacting, always chasing, always trying harder, your silence suddenly feels unfamiliar to him. At first, he may think it is temporary. He may expect you to come back the same way you always did before. But when he realizes your distance is coming from genuine emotional growth, not anger, it forces him to confront reality. Now he starts questioning things. Why are you no longer emotionally available to his inconsistency? Why do you seem calmer without him? Why does your energy feel different? Why does it suddenly feel like he no longer has unlimited access to your heart? And that is where the real shift begins. Because healing changes your standards. Once you experience emotional peace, You become less willing to tolerate confusion. You stop romanticizing emotional unavailability. You stop making excuses for behavior that drains you mentally. You realize that love should not constantly feel like emotional survival. Many women think healing means becoming cold, detached, or emotionally unavailable forever. But true healing actually softens you in a healthy way. It allows you to love without losing yourself. It allows you to care deeply without becoming emotionally dependent. It allows you to recognize red flags without ignoring them simply because you are afraid of being alone. And perhaps the most important part of healing silence is this. It teaches you that closure does not always come from another person. Sometimes closure comes from accepting reality, accepting that you cannot force effort, accepting that you cannot heal someone through unconditional patience, accepting that no amount of overloving can make someone emotionally ready if they refuse to grow. That acceptance is painful at first, but it is also freeing, because once you stop trying to control the outcome, you begin reclaiming your power. Your happiness no longer depends on whether someone texts you back. Your confidence no longer depends on whether someone chooses you. You stop viewing love as something you must earn through suffering. And that emotional independence creates a peace that no relationship can fake. Ironically, that is often when people begin seeing your value clearly, not because you became louder, but because you stopped begging to be heard. Not because you chased harder, but because you finally walked away from emotional chaos and chose yourself. Healing silence changes everything because it transforms your energy from wounded desperation into quiet strength. And quiet strength leaves a deeper impact than emotional chasing ever will. One of the most powerful things a woman can do after emotional heartbreak is stop making a man the center of her entire emotional world. The truth is, the faster you become emotionally available to your own growth and emotionally unavailable to his confusion, the faster everything in your life begins to change. Most people think getting someone back requires more communication, more explaining, more emotional effort, and more chances. But often, the exact opposite creates the shift. What truly changes the dynamic is when a woman stops pouring all her energy into understanding him and starts pouring that energy back into rebuilding herself. When a man becomes inconsistent, distant, or emotionally confusing, many women respond by trying harder. They overanalyze every message, replay every conversation in their minds, and constantly search for ways to reconnect emotionally. Their focus becomes completely consumed by his behavior. They wake up thinking about him and go to sleep emotionally exhausted because of him. And without realizing it, they slowly abandon themselves while trying to save the relationship. That emotional imbalance is dangerous because it places your happiness in someone else's hands. Your mood depends on whether he texts you. Your confidence depends on how much attention he gives you. Your peace depends on whether he acts right that day. And once your emotional stability becomes attached to another person's inconsistency, anxiety takes over your life. But something powerful happens the moment you decide to emotionally detach from confusion and reconnect with your own growth. Suddenly, your focus shifts. Instead of chasing clarity from someone who keeps giving mixed signals, you begin creating clarity within yourself. Instead of asking why he changed, you begin asking why you tolerated emotional uncertainty for so long. Instead of waiting for him to choose you fully, you start choosing yourself again. That shift changes your entire energy. Growth is attractive because it reflects emotional strength. A woman who is focused on healing, improving herself, building her confidence, protecting her peace, and creating a better life naturally becomes magnetic. Not because she is trying to impress anyone, but because genuine self-development creates confidence from the inside out. Her conversations change, her posture changes, her emotional reactions change. She no longer carries the heavy energy of desperation because her identity is no longer trapped inside someone else's validation. Many men do not expect this transformation. They expect a woman they confused emotionally to remain emotionally available forever. They expect her to continue waiting, continue chasing, continue hoping. And when she suddenly redirects her energy toward herself, it catches them off guard. At first, they may not fully understand what changed, but they feel it. Your absence feels different when it comes from growth instead of sadness. Now he notices that you are no longer reacting emotionally to everything he does. He notices that you seem calmer, stronger, more grounded. Your world no longer revolves around his attention, and that uncertainty creates curiosity inside him, because human beings naturally notice what feels emotionally unavailable after once feeling guaranteed access to it. But this is important to understand. The goal should never be to fake growth just to make someone come back. Real growth is not a performance. Real growth is internal. It is waking up one day and realizing you deserve more than emotional confusion. It is understanding that your life cannot pause every time someone becomes inconsistent. It is finally recognizing that your worth does not decrease simply because another person failed to value you correctly. Too many women spend years trying to become enough for someone emotionally unavailable, when the real issue was never their worth. The real issue was that they kept giving loyalty, patience, and emotional access to someone incapable of reciprocating it properly. And eventually, exhaustion forces a decision. Either continue losing yourself in emotional chaos or begin growing into the strongest version of yourself. Growth changes your standards. You stop accepting half-hearted communication. You stop romanticizing emotional inconsistency. You stop making excuses for behavior that constantly hurts you. And most importantly, you stop settling for temporary attention disguised as love. Because once you start building a healthier relationship with yourself, unhealthy dynamics become harder to tolerate. This is why emotional growth often creates the very thing people were desperately chasing before: respect. A man may ignore emotional pleading, but he notices emotional transformation. He notices when the woman who once tolerated confusion no longer entertains it. He notices when your attention becomes less accessible. He notices when your happiness no longer depends on him being present every second. And ironically, the less your life revolves around getting him back, the more powerful your presence becomes in his mind. Why? Because confidence creates emotional impact. When a woman is genuinely focused on her own evolution, she radiates something that cannot be faked: peace, stability, self-respect, purpose. Those qualities naturally draw attention because they feel rare in a world filled with emotional neediness. But even deeper than attracting someone back is the freedom that growth gives you emotionally. You stop fearing abandonment the way you once did. You stop seeing rejection as proof that you are unworthy. You realize that losing someone who could not fully appreciate your value is not the end of your story. And that mindset changes everything, because now you are no longer operating from fear. A woman who is emotionally available to her own growth becomes unstoppable because she no longer depends on external validation to feel valuable. She understands that love should add to her peace, not destroy it. She understands that the right relationship will never require her to constantly prove her worth. And once she reaches that level of emotional awareness, her entire presence changes. Whether he comes back or not, she wins, because she is no longer trapped in the exhausting cycle of chasing someone who keeps creating confusion. She is building herself instead of breaking herself. She is healing instead of begging. She is growing instead of waiting. And that transformation becomes far more powerful than any emotional reaction ever could be. At the end of the day, love should never cost you your peace, your dignity, or your self-worth. The right man will never need to be convinced to value you. And sometimes the greatest power you have is not holding on tighter. It's learning when to let go gracefully. Because when you finally focus on becoming stronger, calmer, happier, and harder to replace, everything changes. Either he comes back with real intentions, or you finally realize you were always too valuable to beg for love in the first place. If this message spoke to you, keep growing, keep healing, and never forget your worth.